This is Dick Price and Sharon Kyle. We're back with Coffee with Dick and Sharon. Again, today we're going to talk about the Care Court bill that's wending its way through the state legislature.
That's right. So I'm Sharon and he's Dick, and I'm the publisher of the LA Progressive and he is the editor. And Care Court, CARE is actually an acronym. It is a piece of legislation that's going through California, and the acronym stands for Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Court.
We've been working with a group of partners and activists to stop this bill, and today we wanted to tell you why. First, what the bill does, and this is a pet bill, a major bill of Governor Gavin Newsom. It's a major plank in his re-election campaign, and what it does, it sets up a court system that enables people to commit family members and other people to coerced care, that is, treatment for mental health problems and substance abuse problems, even though researchers and people who work in this field have long known that coerced care for alcoholics, drug addicts, and people with mental health issues is not very effective.
So this kind of came onto our radar kind of suddenly. It sounds like a great bill, Care Courts. I mean, who could be against care? Who could be against providing care to people who are challenged with mental health issues? But it wasn't until I found out how many organizations are standing in opposition to this legislation that I started to look deeper. And then we had a forum on the issue of Care Courts with people who are experts in the area in this particular on this particular subject. So they're subject matter experts, and they talked to us for about an hour. And one of the things that the Human Rights Watch, who, I mean, everybody knows Human Rights Watch is a very respected organization. And so they says that this expanded judicial infrastructure in practice simply removes unhoused people with perceived mental health conditions from the public eye. It does nothing to truly deal with the problem of the multitudes of unhoused people in the state of California.
We Californians and people all across the country are up in arms with the number of homeless people on our streets that are there for year after year or decade after decade. And it used to be that the homeless here in Los Angeles were much more successfully corralled, hidden down on Skid Row, on streets that the main traffic flow avoided, and you had to know to go down there, and then you saw all the homeless people. Well, first of all, the homeless population, for economic reasons, perhaps, has greatly expanded, but now all around town, every underpass you go by, every park, every highway, people see homeless, and perhaps their aesthetic sense is offended. They're worried about their children. That's kind of on the negative side, and on the positive side, there's this humanitarian urge that here's all these hurting people, and our political structure and us as citizens haven't found a good way to deal with it. So I think the Democrats and Newsom and his allies in the Assembly see that they need to come forward with something. They need to come something with a big price tag, so it really looks like they're doing wonderful things. And the problem with that is they miss the mark, because the people who work with the homeless and the houseless and the mentally ill know that what's really needed is supportive long-term housing with wraparound services that'll deal with their mental issues, they'll deal with their drug issues, they'll deal with their alcohol issues. And this plan, this very expensive plan, does not do that.
Not only does it not do that, it also takes away from resources that were available for voluntary mental health care. from housing and from housing for unhoused people. So it's going to take funding away from existing programs that already provide voluntary mental health treatment and permanent supportive housing without adding new resources. By prioritizing people with court-ordered treatment housing plans for already scarce and inadequate services, the state makes surrendering rights a prerequisite to receive services. So in other words, one of the things that this care court initiative would do is it would take people's rights away and put them into conservatorship.
Yeah, and so I have the experience of many years ago. I helped run a halfway house down in Torrance at the height of the crack epidemic, and I was really good at keeping track of things long before computers. And I had a great notebook of all the resources in all of LA County and Orange County of places that people could go if they were having problems with alcohol, but especially if they were having problems with crack cocaine. And the county simply didn't have nearly enough facilities. They didn't have, I mean, and many of the facilities they had, were, honest to God, were hellholes. And some of them were lockdown facilities. And here we are again. Now we have all these homeless people, but we're starting from the wrong end of the stick. What we need to do is build affordable housing and provide the services around it, and then bring the people into who will want to come into it. They're not going to want to come into these coercive services. They're going to resist and run away. And the only good thing that'll happen is politicians will get to pat themselves on the back, and they may well get reelected because of it.
So look, Dick, I think that you and I really need to have a conversation about what we really think this is about. I remember the war on drugs. Actually, we're still in the war on drugs. We've literally spent trillions of dollars on the war on drugs. And maybe back in the 60s, when I guess it was Richard Nixon came up with this idea, maybe that term, the war on drugs, maybe they tested it. You know, maybe they tested it with certain groups and found out, okay, this is a good term and it'll get us some money.
Right, because their other choice was the war on Black people, but somehow they didn't feel that that one would quite work. But the war on drugs has essentially been a war on Black people. Many people who are concerned about homelessness or hear about it or read about it would be mightily surprised if they went down to Skid Row and saw the great bulk of the people are Black men, some Black women. Now we're told that some Latinos, some undocumented Latinos are hiding in the shadows, but that's really it. So it's yet another issue that has racism as its core. That's partly why we've been unwilling to deal with it. That's why there's a thing called NIMBYism, not in my backyard, because they don't want a bunch of recently homeless people living in a rehab apartment building in their neighborhood.
So according to some of the information that we've done, that we've researched, it shows that due to discrimination in housing, employment, lending, policing, healthcare, Black and brown people have higher rates of houselessness. So it's because of these ancillary issues, all of these are social ills that we continue to neglect. We don't look at, again, the root cause, the lack of employment or discrimination in employment, discrimination in housing, discrimination in lending, discrimination in all these other areas that put certain people on a path that leads them to being unhoused. Those people are disproportionately represented in Black and brown communities. And those are the people who will be disproportionately targeted by this CARE Act.
Right, and the standard message about homelessness is that it's the individual's fault. If they didn't use drugs, if they didn't drink too much, if they would just go get a darn job, if they would take their medication, they would be able to find housing and all would be fine. So that absolves any guilt from the rest of society for creating these situations, this situation that Sharon talked about. And if we really care about solving homelessness problems and drug addiction and alcoholism, we need to look at these disparities of advantages. We need to look at educational systems, job systems, racism, and so forth. And then that's when homelessness will start to disappear.
Right. So the unhoused community in Los Angeles, they did not exist, certainly not to the degree that they exist 50 years ago. Now, suddenly, over the past 50 years, these people suddenly didn't just decide, oh, I just decide that I just don't want to work. I would prefer to just not have a home. There are other factors that produce these outcomes. And those factors that produce these outcomes are directly tied to our unfair economic system, economic injustice, a capitalism system that is predatory. So I think we'll stop it there.
I have one more point. Now, many of the regular everyday people like Sharon and I who support this bill, some of them do have family members who have mental health problems, who have alcohol problems, who have drug problems, and need to have services. But there are other ways to provide those services. If housing services and supportive services were available, there's other kinds of more simpler laws without creating a whole new system that could get them the kind of treatment they need. There's, our heart goes out for people who have family members with trouble. We've seen that in our own neighborhoods and families. And this is not to disparage their earnest effort for a solution.
Yeah. But unfortunately, all experts say this would not provide them with the solution that they're looking for. So,
right, because that's not really the aim. The aim is the midterm elections.
Yeah. Well, this is Dick and Sharon, LA Progressive. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. See you next week.